A lonely billionaire Klaus Reinhardt hires a florist Lena Hartmann to pretend to be his fiancée for a weekend. But he didn't expect what happens when a billionaire's carefully controlled life takes an unexpected turn. Watch until the end to uncover the surprise that no one saw coming. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Klaus sat in his lavish penthouse high above Berlin, the city sprawling beneath him like a vast canvas of human activity. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the opulent furnishings and high-tech gadgets that filled the space. Yet, the beauty of his surroundings did little to alleviate the weight of loneliness that hung over him like a thick fog. As he scrolled through social media, his heart sank further with each image of smiling couples, their happiness starkly contrasting the emptiness he felt inside. He paused on a photo of a friend's engagement announcement, the couple beaming with joy, surrounded by friends and family. A pang of envy twisted in his chest. Klaus had built a fortune through sheer determination and hard work, but the price had been his personal life. He was in his late 30s, a billionaire by any standards, yet the only company he had was the muted silence of his penthouse and the occasional visit from Anya, his tireless assistant. Just another day in paradise, Klaus muttered to himself, his voice echoing in the empty room. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, feeling the familiar ache of isolation. He had always been a private person, focusing on his career and pushing away the distractions of relationships. Yet, as he gazed out at the bustling streets of Berlin, he couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was missing from his life. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Lena stood amidst the vibrant blooms in her small floral shop, deeply immersed in her work. The scent of fresh flowers enveloped her, a comforting aroma that contrasted sharply with her financial worries. She was in her 20s, with dreams that seemed to grow more distant each day. Her shop, Lena's Blooms, was a labor of love, but the struggle to keep it afloat was taking its toll. Customers were few and far between, and the bills piled up like wilting petals. Lena arranged a bouquet of bright sunflowers, their cheerful faces lifting her spirits momentarily. She loved flowers. Each one had its story, a beauty that often went unnoticed. Yet, as she placed the final flower in the arrangement, a sigh escaped her lips. "What's the point of all this if I can't make ends meet?" she whispered to herself, glancing at the empty storefront. It was a quiet afternoon, and the loneliness crept in, echoing the sentiments she had seen in Klaus's social media posts, both of them trapped in their own worlds of solitude. "Maybe if I just had a little more luck," she contemplated, her thoughts drifting to a better life. She envisioned a bustling shop filled with smiling customers, vibrant floral displays, and even the occasional wedding bouquet. But for now, her reality was a continuous struggle, one that left her feeling as though she were treading water, barely keeping her head above the surface. Back in his penthouse, Klaus leaned forward, his fingers hovering over his phone. He had been avoiding the inevitable conversation with his family about his single status, especially with the upcoming family reunion looming. It would be a weekend filled with probing questions about his love life, or rather, the lack thereof. He couldn't bear the thought of enduring their concerned glances and whispered speculations. The pressure was mounting, and he felt cornered. "Why can't they just understand that I'm fine? I don't need a relationship to be happy," he muttered to himself, frustration bubbling within. Yet, the truth was undeniable. He was tired of pretending. He longed for companionship, for a connection that transcended the superficial relationships he had cultivated in the world of business. But how could he explain that to his family? Just then, Anya entered the room, her presence a welcome disruption to his spiraling thoughts. "Klaus," she said, her voice brisk and businesslike, "we need to discuss the family reunion. It's just a week away, and your mother is already asking about your plans." Klaus grimaced, a frown etching deeper lines on his forehead. "I'd rather not talk about it, Anya. You know how they are." Anya crossed her arms, her expression unwavering. "I know, but avoiding the topic won't make it go away. You can't keep dodging their questions forever. They want to see you happy. What do you suggest? An impromptu relationship?" Klaus snapped, the sarcasm lacing his words. "I'm not interested in playing games, Anya." "Actually, that's not a bad idea," Anya replied, her eyes lighting up with a sudden thought. Claus raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued despite himself. "What if you hired someone to pretend to be your fiancé for the weekend? It would take the pressure off, and you could present a united front to your family." Claus stared at her, incredulous. "You can't be serious. That's absurd. Think about it. You wouldn't have to deal with the interrogation, and it might even take the heat off your back," she persisted, undeterred by his resistance. "You could hire an actress or someone who's looking for a little extra cash. It could work." He leaned back in his chair, contemplating the idea. It was ridiculous, yet the more he thought about it, the more appealing it seemed. The thought of facing his family alone, without a buffer, filled him with dread. "And how do you propose I find someone willing to play this role?" he asked, a hint of intrigue creeping into his voice. "I can post an ad online," Anya suggested, her enthusiasm bubbling over. "There are plenty of people out there looking for unconventional gigs. It might even be fun." Claus sighed, his mind racing with possibilities. The notion felt wrong, yet it also felt like a lifeline. "Fine, but this is just for the weekend. I don't want to complicate things any further," he warned, his voice stern. "Of course. Just a weekend," Anya replied, her smile wide as she pulled out her phone. "I'll get right on it." As she began typing, Claus couldn't help but wonder what kind of person would respond to such an unusual ad. And deep down, he felt a flicker of excitement at the thought of having someone by his side, even if it was merely for show. Perhaps, he mused, a little pretense wouldn't hurt. It might just be the distraction he needed from the weight of his reality. Little did Claus know, the hiring of a fake fiancé would set into motion a series of events that would challenge his perceptions of love, connection, and his own heart. As Anya finalized the ad, he found himself staring out at the city below, feeling a strange sense of anticipation for the unknown. Lena sat at the small, cluttered table of her flower shop, surrounded by the sweet scent of blooming peonies and the vibrant colors of tulips. She scrolled through her phone, looking for inspiration for a wedding arrangement she was preparing for a client. As she browsed, an ad caught her eye, its bold text stark against the soft pastel background. "Seeking a fake fiancé for a family gathering, generous compensation." She hesitated, her brow furrowing in skepticism. It felt too absurd, almost like a plot from a romantic comedy. Yet, as she read the details, curiosity piqued within her. "What do I have to lose?" she muttered under her breath. The rent was due, and her savings were dwindling. She clicked on the ad, her heart racing slightly. The thought of stepping into a world so different from her own was exhilarating. A billionaire needing a pretend fiancé? It seemed ludicrous, yet there was a thrill to the idea. After a moment's hesitation, she filled out the application form. Name: Lena Hartmann. Qualifications: florist with a knack for charming family gatherings, she typed, her fingers flying across the screen. She added a cheeky note: "I promise to look good in pictures." With a deep breath, she hit send, feeling a mix of anticipation and disbelief. Meanwhile, Claus sat in a chic cafe in Berlin, nursing a black coffee as he scanned through the profiles of potential candidates Anya had sent him. He had expected a stream of generic responses, but when he came across Lena's application, something about her candidness struck him. The words were vibrant, filled with a spark of life that felt refreshing compared to the usual rehearsed replies he had seen. "Anya," he said, looking up from his phone. "Who is this Lena Hartmann? She seems different." Anya, sitting across from him, leaned in to read the application. "She's a florist, Claus. I think she might actually be a good fit. She seems genuine, and it looks like she has a good sense of humor." Claus frowned, contemplating the idea of meeting her. "You think she can handle my family?" Anya chuckled, shaking her head. "Honestly, I think they could use someone like her. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? You just need her for the weekend." Claus sighed, knowing Anya was right but feeling a pang of unease. "Set up a meeting. I want to see if she's as bold in person as she is on paper." The following day, they met at the same cafe. When Lena walked in, she was a whirlwind of color and energy, her floral patterned dress matching the vibrancy of the flowers she adored. Claus was taken aback by her presence. She was not what he expected from a mere hire. "Lena," he called, rising slightly to greet her. "Mr. Claus," she replied with a playful smile, extending her hand. "I hope you don't mind me calling you that. It feels more formal." Claus chuckled, shaking her hand firmly. "Claus is fine. I can't say I'm used to being referred to formally, though." They settled into their seats, and Lena wasted no time. "So, tell me about your family. What should I expect?" Claus leaned back, surprised by her directness. Most people tiptoed around the subject. They can be a bit overwhelming. They mean well, but they have their own ideas about life and how I should be living it. Lena nodded, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Like what? Marriage? Kids?" He paused, taken aback by her straightforwardness. "Exactly. They're eager for me to settle down, and they're not shy about it. That's part of why I'm in this predicament." Lena tilted her head, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "So, you need me to act like your fiancé to fend off the marriage talk?" "Pretty much," Claus replied, his lips curving into a half-smile. "And in return, I'll pay you generously for your time." "Generously, huh?" Lena raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just a weekend. I promise I'm not some overly dramatic billionaire with a hidden agenda." She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Good to know. I'll hold you to that. But you should know I have a talent for improvisation. If your family gets too nosy, I might just throw a few wild stories your way to keep them entertained." Claus felt a warmth spread through him at her spirit. "I'd like to see you try. It might just work." As they continued to discuss their arrangement, Lena felt a connection blossoming between them. It was unexpected but exhilarating, a sharp contrast to her monotone life as a florist. Later that evening, Claus sat in his penthouse, staring out at the Berlin skyline, a glass of whiskey in hand. He thought about Lena and how different she was from anyone he had ever known. Her laughter lingered in his mind, and he found himself smiling. Was it possible that this weekend could turn into something more than just a facade? His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. Anya's message popped up. How did it go with the florist? He typed back quickly, "She's interesting. I think she might just pull it off." After a few moments of silence, he added, "There's something about her." Anya's reply was almost instant. "Something? Or someone? You're not falling for your fake fiancé, are you?" Claus felt a rush of warmth at the thought, but shook his head, dismissing it. "It's just business, Anya." Yet, the seed of uncertainty had been planted. The next day, as they prepared for the weekend, they exchanged texts, their conversations light and filled with laughter. Lena shared snippets of her life in the flower shop while Claus opened up about his past, his family's tragic loss that had left him isolated and wary of connection. "I loved my family deeply," he typed, his fingers hesitating over the screen, "but their expectations suffocated me. I don't want to disappoint anyone again." Lena's response was immediate. "You won't disappoint me. I get it, Claus. Sometimes the pressure can feel insurmountable, but we're in this together, right? Just two people pretending." He smiled, feeling an unexpected sense of comfort in her words. Exactly. Just two people pretending. As their messages continued, Claus found himself drawn to Lena's dreams. She shared her ambition of owning a grand flower shop one day, filled with whimsical designs and vibrant colors. Her passion was infectious, and he felt a stirring of something he hadn't felt in years, a desire for connection, for authenticity. "I believe you'll get there, Lena," he typed, meaning every word. "You have a gift, and the world deserves to see it." "Thanks, Claus," she replied, the warmth of her gratitude palpable even through the screen. "And who knows, maybe this weekend will inspire me in ways I can't even imagine." Claus couldn't shake the feeling that this weekend was about more than just pretense. As they prepared to step into the roles they had crafted for themselves, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could both find something real amidst the artifice. With that thought lingering in the air, he set his phone down and stared out at the sunset, painting the skies of Berlin in shades of orange and pink, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation for the days to come. As Claus drove towards his family estate, the sprawling grounds of manicured gardens and elegant architecture loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. Next to him, Lena sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap, taking in the beauty of the surroundings. She had never been to a place like this before, and the grandeur both intimidated and fascinated her. "Is it always like this?" she asked, breaking the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. Claus glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "In a way, yes. My family prides itself on maintaining tradition." He paused, his expression darkening momentarily. "Sometimes, that can feel more like a burden than a privilege." Lena nodded, her curiosity piqued. "You don't sound too fond of it." He shrugged, the weight of his family's expectations hanging heavy in the air. "It's complicated." As they approached the entrance, Klaus's heart raced. The last time he had been here, the laughter and warmth had felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by loss and grief. Now, with Lena beside him, he hoped for a different outcome. He parked the car and stepped out, taking a deep breath to steady himself. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the crisp autumn air, a reminder that change was inevitable. "Ready?" he asked, extending his hand to Lena. She hesitated for a moment, then took his hand, feeling the warmth of his grasp. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they walked towards the grand entrance, and as they crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. The scent of rich food and the sound of laughter filled the air, enveloping them. Klaus's family members were already gathered in the expansive living room, their voices a symphony of excitement and chatter. "Aunt Greta!" Claus greeted a silver-haired woman who was bustling about, her arms laden with trays of appetizers. She turned, her eyes sparkling with recognition. "Oh, Claus, you're finally here. And who is this lovely lady?" she asked, her gaze shifting to Lena, who stood slightly behind Claus, feeling the weight of scrutiny. "This is Lena, my fiancée," Claus introduced, a mix of pride and protectiveness in his tone. "Fiancée?" The room fell silent for a moment, a collective gasp escaping the lips of Klaus's relatives. Lena felt her cheeks flush under the intensity of their gazes. "Charmed, I'm sure," Aunt Greta said, her voice a mix of warmth and skepticism. "Tell me, dear, how did you and Claus meet?" Lena swallowed hard, casting a quick glance at Claus, who gave her an encouraging nod. "We actually met through a mutual friend. I'm a florist, and he needed help with an event. It just blossomed from there." "Blossomed?" Claus echoed, arching an eyebrow at Lena, who flashed him a playful smile. "That's one way to put it." The family seemed to accept her answer, and gradually, the conversations resumed. Lena found herself surrounded by probing questions about her background, her career, and her interests, but she handled them with grace, her witty remarks drawing laughter from Klaus's relatives. He watched her, a sense of admiration swelling within him. She had a way of making people feel at ease, even in a room filled with skepticism. As the evening wore on, they moved to the dining room, where a lavish feast awaited them. The long table was adorned with fine china and sparkling crystal, a testament to the family's wealth. Lena marveled at the setting, her heart racing at the thought of fitting in with such an elite group. Lena, dear, Klaus's mother, a poised woman with an air of authority, addressed her from the head of the table. "We're so pleased to have you. Tell us, when are you two planning to get married?" Lena's heart sank at the sudden pressure. "We haven't discussed specifics yet," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Just enjoying each other's company for now." "Enjoying?" "Oh, darling, it's all about the timeline," Klaus's younger sister chimed in, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You don't want to keep the family waiting." Claus shot his sister a warning glance, but Lena found herself amused by the banter. "I suppose I could start planning now," she said playfully. "Should I consider a winter wedding? Or maybe a spring affair with all the flowers in bloom?" The table erupted in laughter, and Claus felt a surge of pride. Lena was effortlessly charming, drawing them in with her humor and lightness. Yet, beneath the laughter, he felt a strange protectiveness for her. The pressure of their charade hung thick in the air, and he sensed that it wouldn't be long before the truth would come crashing down. As dinner continued, the conversation shifted towards family traditions and the importance of settling down. Claus deflected questions about his career, focusing on Lena instead. But with each inquiry, he felt the walls closing in. The desire to shield her from his family's expectations grew stronger. "Lena, what do you think about children?" his mother asked, her gaze piercing. Lena hesitated, glancing at Claus, who remained stoic. "I think children are wonderful," she replied carefully. "But that's something to think about later, right?" "Right," Claus said, his voice firm. "We're just enjoying our time together for now." The conversation resumed, but the tension lingered. After dinner, Claus led Lena out to the terrace. The cool night air a welcome relief. They leaned against the railing, the stars twinkling above them, a stark contrast to the lively chaos of the house behind them. "Are you all right?" Claus asked, concern etched across his face. Lena sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's just a lot. I didn't expect them to be so intense about the wedding plans." "I know. I'm sorry about that. They can be overwhelming." She looked at him, her eyes searching his. "Do you ever feel trapped by their expectations?" Klaus's expression darkened. "Every day. It's suffocating sometimes, but I won't let them dictate my life." Lena nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "You don't have to pretend with me, you know. I'm here because I want to be." He stepped closer, the distance between them closing. "And I'm glad you are. It's different with you." "Different how?" she challenged, her heart racing. He paused, searching her eyes. "You make me feel human again, like I can have a life beyond this facade." In that moment, the air crackled with unspoken tension. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending shivers down her spine. Lena leaned into him slightly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Maybe we can make this work," she whispered, her breath mingling with the cool night air. Klaus's gaze softened, and for a fleeting second, the world around them faded away. The connection they shared felt palpable, electric. Caught in the moment, they moved closer, their lips almost touching. "Lena," he murmured, but the sound of laughter from inside broke the spell. The moment slipped away like sand through their fingers, but the chemistry lingered, filling the space between them with possibilities. They stood there, two souls drawn together, knowing that their journey was just beginning, fraught with challenges yet brimming with hope for what lay ahead. The sun peeked through the grand windows of Klaus's family estate, casting a warm glow over the meticulously kept gardens. Claus and Lena wandered through the vibrant floral displays, the air rich with the scent of blooming roses and lilacs. As they strolled, laughter bubbled up between them, a sound that seemed incongruous in such a stately environment, yet felt utterly right. "Can you believe they expect us to plan a wedding already?" Lena teased, her voice light as she tossed her hair back, the sunlight catching the golden strands. Claus chuckled, shaking his head. "I think they're a bit eager," he replied, glancing sideways at her. "But I suppose it's not every day they get to meet my future wife." Lena rolled her eyes playfully. "Well, if that's the case, I should start practicing my I do with a bit more enthusiasm." She struck a mock pose, one hand on her hip and the other raised dramatically, as if accepting a bouquet at the altar. Claus laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You might need to tone it down a bit. We don't want them thinking I've proposed already." They continued walking, the sun warming their faces as they moved deeper into the garden. Claus felt an unfamiliar lightness in his heart. The weight of loneliness that usually clung to him was momentarily forgotten, replaced by a sense of companionship he hadn't anticipated. "Tell me about your flower shop," Claus prompted, genuinely interested in her passion. Lena's face lit up at the question. "It's small, but it's my little haven. I create arrangements for weddings, events, anything really. Flowers are so much more than just decoration. They convey emotions. Each one has a meaning. Did you know that?" Claus shook his head, intrigued. "I didn't. What do roses represent?" "Love, of course," she replied, a hint of mischief in her voice. "But there are different colors, too. Red for passion, white for purity, yellow for friendship." It's all so fascinating. Then I suppose I should be careful with my flower choices from now on, he said, a playful smirk on his lips. Wouldn't want to send the wrong message. Lena laughed, the sound ringing like a melody in the air. Just stick with red roses for me. That way, you can't go wrong. As they wandered through the garden, the conversation flowed easily. They shared stories of their childhoods, their aspirations, and the little quirks that made them who they were. Claus found himself drawn to Lena in a way he hadn't expected. Her laughter was infectious, her spirit brightening even the most mundane topics. But as they rounded a corner, they stumbled upon a picturesque gazebo, draped with climbing vines and surrounded by blooming flowers. The beauty of the scene took their breath away. Claus turned to Lena, his expression softening. "This place is beautiful," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It feels like a painting." "It does," Lena agreed, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's like we stepped into a fairy tale." Claus took a step closer, his heart racing. "You know, it's rare to find someone who can appreciate this kind of beauty." Lena's gaze met his, and for a moment, the world around them faded. "It's not just the scenery, Claus. It's the company that makes it special." Before he could think, Claus leaned in, brushing his lips against hers in a tentative kiss. It was soft and sweet, a gentle exploration that sent sparks through both of them. Lena's eyes widened in surprise, but she melted into the kiss, a soft sigh escaping her lips. As they parted, both breathless, the reality of their situation crashed down around them. Claus stepped back, his cheeks flushed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No, don't apologize," Lena interrupted, her heart racing. "That was nice." Claus nodded, his mind racing. Nice seems like an understatement. The moment hung in the air, charged with unspoken feelings and the weight of their arrangement. They both knew it was complicated, but in that instant, nothing else mattered. Later, as they returned to the house, the atmosphere shifted. Lena felt a tightening in her chest, a sense of foreboding creeping in as they entered the grand living room, where Klaus's family had gathered. The walls echoed with laughter, but the moment Claus and Lena stepped inside, the mood shifted. The conversation turned to them, curious eyes scrutinizing their every move. "Look who finally decided to join us," Klaus's aunt exclaimed, her voice overly cheerful. "We were just discussing wedding plans. You two should join in." Lena's heart sank. She glanced at Claus, who wore a strained smile, clearly uncomfortable. "Of course, we're just getting to know each other better," Claus said diplomatically, trying to deflect the conversation. "Better? But darling, don't you think it's time to discuss the next steps? You can't string Lena along forever, can you?" Another family member chimed in, a hint of challenge in their tone. Lena felt her stomach twist. She had expected questions, but the intensity of their scrutiny made her uneasy. She caught Klaus's eye, and for the briefest moment, she could see the turmoil within him. As the discussions continued, Lena's discomfort grew. She felt like a pawn in a game she hadn't fully signed up for. The pressures of their pretense began to weigh heavily on her mind, and she could sense Klaus's family's expectations pressing down on them like a thick fog. Later that evening, after the family had settled into the living room for a game, Lena excused herself to grab a glass of water. As she turned the corner into the kitchen, she overheard snippets of conversation that made her pause. "I heard Claus has been considering an arranged marriage," a voice said, filled with conspiratorial intrigue. "It would solve everything, don't you think? He needs a woman who can handle the family business." Her heart raced. Arranged marriage? The words echoed in her mind, filling her with dread. "What about that Lena girl? She seems sweet, but she's hardly the type," another voice chimed in. "She's just a florist. Claus could do so much better." Lena felt her cheeks flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. How could they speak about her like that? She turned to leave, but the weight of their words clung to her like a shadow. Returning to the living room, she plastered on a smile, but inside, she felt anything but cheerful. The laughter around her felt hollow, and Klaus's gaze was filled with concern as he noticed her demeanor shift. "Is everything all right?" he asked quietly, leaning in closer. Lena forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just a bit tired, I guess." Claus studied her, his brow furrowed. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "Of course," she replied, but doubt gnawed at her. The reality of their situation loomed large, and she felt the walls closing in. As the evening wore on, Lena's thoughts spiraled. She knew they were pretending, but a part of her had begun to wish for something real. Yet as she glanced around at Klaus's family, discussing their futures with unyielding expectations, she couldn't shake the feeling that their charade might not withstand the pressure. Later that night, as they settled into their shared room, Lena couldn't hold back her mounting frustration anymore. "Claus, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. Claus turned to her, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" "I overheard your family today," Lena said, her heart pounding. "They're talking about arranged marriages and expectations. I can't pretend to be something I'm not." Claus stepped closer, his expression softening. "Lena, I never intended for this to go that far. I just needed someone to be by my side for the weekend. But it feels like more than just pretending. It's becoming suffocating," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I understand. I want you to feel comfortable," he reassured her, reaching out to take her hand. "We can find a way to make this work without the pressure." Her heart raced at his touch, but doubts lingered in her mind. "Can we really? What if your family doesn't accept that?" Claus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll deal with them. You shouldn't have to bear the burden of my family's expectations." Lena looked into his eyes, searching for reassurance. "But what if it's more complicated than that? What if we're just delaying the inevitable?" The air grew heavy with unspoken feelings, both of them standing on the precipice of something deeper. They were navigating a fragile balance between their arrangement and the undeniable connection they had forged over the weekend. As they stood there, the weight of uncertainty hung between them, both questioning their feelings and the truth of their situation. Would they be able to withstand the expectations of Klaus's family while exploring the real emotions that had begun to blossom? In that moment, they were caught in a web of confusion, desire, and fear, both aware of the delicate line they were walking but unsure of how to proceed. Little did they know that the weekend was far from over, and the revelations that awaited them would challenge everything they. As the sun rose over the sprawling estate, casting a golden hue across the manicured lawns, Claus felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Today was the final day of the weekend that had unexpectedly transformed his carefully constructed life. Glancing at Lena, who was arranging a bouquet of wildflowers in the kitchen, he marveled at her ability to brighten even the most solemn spaces. She hummed softly, lost in her work, and for a moment, Claus allowed himself to appreciate the warmth of her presence beside him. "Do you think your family will like this one?" Lena asked, holding up the bouquet, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. The vibrant colors seemed to reflect her spirit, and Claus couldn't help but smile. "They'll love it. You have a way of capturing beauty in everything you touch," he replied, sincerity lacing his words. Lena blushed slightly, the praise catching her off guard, but she quickly masked her shyness with a playful grin. "Just trying to make a good impression," she said, her voice light. "After all, I'm the fiancé now." Klaus's smile faded momentarily as he thought about the weight of that title. It wasn't just a playful charade. It was a shield against the relentless questions of his family. As they set the table for the grand brunch, the atmosphere felt charged with unspoken tension. He could sense the anticipation building. His family would expect a solid display of their relationship, and the pressure hung heavy in the air like the scent of freshly baked pastries. "Are you ready for this?" Claus asked, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. Lena looked up, her expression turning serious. "I guess I have to be. But Claus, what if they ask about our future? What if they want to know when we'll get married?" He hesitated, the question echoing in his mind. "We'll handle it together," he assured her, though uncertainty flickered beneath the surface. "Just remember, it's all an act. We're in this together." As guests began to filter into the dining room, Claus felt an electric tingle of anxiety. He positioned himself next to Lena, their shoulders brushing as they greeted his family. The laughter and chatter swelled, filling the space with warmth, but Claus felt the gnawing sensation of being trapped in a performance. "Lena, sweetie, how lovely to finally meet you," Klaus's mother exclaimed, enveloping Lena in a tight embrace. "I hope you're ready for a weekend full of questions about when my son will settle down." The playful jab drew laughter from the table, and Claus shot his mother a warning look. Lena, however, took it in stride, her laughter ringing out with a confidence he admired. "I've been preparing for this my whole life," she quipped, a twinkle in her eye. "I'm just waiting for the right moment to drop the big news." Claus choked on his juice, nearly spitting it out at her unexpected boldness. "What news?" he asked, feigning innocence, even though his heart raced at the thought. "Oh, the one about our plans to tour the world together before settling down in the countryside," she said, winking at him. His heart swelled, amused by her quick wit. "Sounds like a solid plan," he replied, his voice low enough for her to hear. As brunch progressed, the questions became more frequent and pointed. "So, when do you two plan on getting married?" Klaus's aunt inquired, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. Claus felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. "We're taking our time," he replied, attempting to steer the conversation away from the topic. "Getting to know each other is important." Lena jumped in. "Yes, we want to enjoy our time together without rushing into anything. After all, who doesn't love a good adventure?" Claus watched her intently, impressed by how she navigated the probing inquiries with grace. But just as he thought they could pull off the charade seamlessly, the familiar sound of high heels echoed from the entrance. Marie. Klaus's heart sank into his stomach as he turned to see his ex-girlfriend stride into the room, exuding an air of confidence that made the atmosphere shift. She spotted Claus and gave him a bright smile that felt more like a warning than a greeting. "Claus, I didn't know you were having a gathering. I thought I'd surprise you." The room fell silent, all eyes darting between Claus and Marie. Lena's expression shifted, a mix of confusion and unease flickering across her face. Her hand instinctively tightened around her fork. "Marie, what a surprise," Claus managed to say, his voice strained as he tried to mask the discomfort brewing within him. Marie approached, her gaze sweeping over Lena with a calculating look. "And who might this be?" she asked, her tone dripping with feigned politeness. "This is Lena, my fiancée," Claus said, the word feeling heavy on his tongue. He glanced at Lena, who was suddenly very still, her eyes wide as she processed the change in dynamics. "Fiancée?" Marie smiled, but there was an edge to it. "How charming. Claus, dear, I hope you haven't forgotten our history. It's so easy to fall back into old habits, don't you think?" The tension in the room was palpable, and Claus could almost hear the gears turning in Lena's mind. "We have a special connection," he replied, forcing a calmness that felt like a lie. "Lena and I are very happy together." "Oh, I'm sure you are," Marie said, her voice smooth but laced with sarcasm. "But happiness can be so fleeting, can't it? One moment you're in love, and the next, you're wondering what went wrong." Lena's grip on her fork tightened, and Claus could see the hurt flashing in her eyes. "I think love is worth fighting for," she said, her voice steady, surprising even herself. "Don't you, Marie?" "Oh, sweetheart," Marie replied with a condescending smile. "You have so much to learn about love. It tends to be more complicated than fairy tales." Claus felt the urge to step in, to defend Lena and their relationship, but he was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. "That's enough, Marie," he said, his tone sharp. "You're not here to discuss my life choices. Isn't that what family gatherings are for?" Marie shot back, glancing around for support, but the tension had thickened, and the family seemed more invested in the unfolding drama than in her words. Lena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, drawing everyone's attention. "I think I need some air," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Excuse me." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Claus felt his heart race as he watched her go. "Lena," he called, but the words fell flat in the charged atmosphere, and Marie's victorious smirk only fueled his frustration. Looks like someone's not cut out for the spotlight, Marie taunted, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Enough, Marie, Claus snapped, his voice low but firm. You've made your point. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go find her. As he strode out of the room, he fought against the whirlwind of emotions churning inside him. He didn't care about Marie's games or her attempts to rekindle old flames. He only cared about Lena and the hurt that had flashed across her face. He needed to find her, to explain, and to assure her that what they had was real and worth fighting for. But in that moment, all he could think about was the fragile connection they had built and whether it could withstand the weight of the past. Claus stood in the garden, a serene oasis of blooming flowers and manicured hedges that offered a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the estate, but it did little to warm the chill that had settled within him since Lena stormed out. His thoughts were a tempest, swirling around the realization that he had fallen for her, truly fallen. The intensity of his feelings caught him off guard. He had only intended to hire a temporary fiancée to appease his family, yet here he was, grappling with a depth of emotion he had long believed was buried beneath layers of grief and isolation. As he paced the cobblestone path, memories of their time together flooded his mind. Their laughter in the gardens, the quiet moments on the terrace, their tentative first kiss under the stars. All these moments had woven a connection he could no longer ignore. She had brought light into his life, and now, the thought of losing her felt unbearable. He realized he had to find her, to tell her everything he felt, to make her understand that what they had wasn't just an act. It was real. With newfound determination, Claus hurried through the estate, the manicured lawns fading into the background as he raced toward the nearest cafe, a small, quaint place at the end of the street. He could picture Lena sitting there, lost in thought, surrounded by the comfort of warm coffee and pastries. The anticipation and anxiety twisted in his stomach as he envisioned her face, soft and contemplative, yet tinged with sadness. He had to confront the ghost of his past that lingered in the air, the specter of Marie, and reconcile it with the promise of a future he dared to hope for with Lena. Meanwhile, Lena sat at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of chamomile tea. The cafe was buzzing with warmth and laughter, but she felt isolated within its walls. Thoughts raced through her mind like the autumn leaves swirling outside. She had been swept away by Klaus's charm, his vulnerability, and the unguarded moments they had shared. Yet, the revelation of Marie's presence, coupled with Klaus's unresolved feelings for her, left a bitter taste in Lena's mouth. How could she trust that what they had was more than a convenient arrangement? Maybe I was just a distraction for him, she mused, taking a sip of her tea. Just a temporary fix for his family's expectations. The realization was painful, and she felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. As much as she wanted to believe in the magic they had created together, the nagging doubts refused to fade. "Excuse me, miss?" A voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She looked up to find a waitress standing beside her, a concerned expression on her face. "Are you all right? You seem a bit down." Lena forced a smile, grateful for the kindness of strangers. "I'm fine, thank you. Just thinking." "Thinking can be heavy sometimes," the waitress replied gently. "If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." With a nod of appreciation, Lena returned her gaze to the window, watching the world go by. The vibrant colors of the autumn leaves juxtaposed the grayness she felt inside. She wanted to believe in love, to embrace the whirlwind of emotions that Claus had stirred within her, but how could she when the shadows of his past loomed so large? Just as she was about to lose herself in her thoughts again, she caught sight of Claus entering the cafe. He looked disheveled yet determined, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto hers. In that instant, the air between them shifted, charged with unspoken words and lingering emotions. Claus approached her table, his heart racing in his chest. "Lena," he breathed, as if trying to catch his breath. "I've been looking for you." Lena's heart skipped a beat, but she maintained a guarded expression. "What do you want, Claus?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "I need to talk to you," he replied, his eyes pleading. Please, just hear me out. She hesitated, torn between the desire to hear what he had to say and the fear of being hurt again. You have to understand, I don't want to be a placeholder in your life. I can't be that. Not after everything. Claus reached across the table, his hand inches from hers. You're not a placeholder. You never were. I thought I was hiring someone to play a role, but I found someone who… He paused, searching for the right words. Someone who makes me feel alive again. Someone I care about deeply. Lena's breath caught in her throat, the sincerity in his voice sending shivers down her spine. But what about Marie? She asked, unable to suppress the tremor in her voice. You still have feelings for her, don't you? I thought I did, Claus admitted, his expression hardening. But that was before I met you. Before you showed me what it means to truly connect with someone. I don't want to go back to my past. I want a future, and I want it with you. Tears brimmed in Lena's eyes, a mix of relief and confusion swirling within her. But how can I trust that? How do I know this isn't just a reaction to what happened? Because I'm standing here, ready to fight for you, Claus said, the urgency in his voice rising. I've spent too long hiding from my feelings, letting my past dictate my future. I won't let anyone, not even Marie, come between us. You're the one I want. As if summoned by fate, Marie entered the cafe just then, her presence cutting through the moment like a knife. Klaus's heart sank as he saw her, but this time, he felt different, stronger. He would not let her sabotage what he had with Lena. Look who we have here, Marie said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she approached their table. The happy couple. How sweet. Lena glanced at Claus, her heart pounding as she braced herself for the impending confrontation. Claus stood tall, his expression firm. Marie, this isn't what you think. Lena and I are together. I've moved on from you, and I won't let you disrupt our lives any longer. Marie crossed her arms, a smirk playing on her lips. Oh, really? After everything we shared, you think you can just walk away? You're making a mistake, Claus. No, he replied, his voice steady. The mistake would be going back to a life that made me miserable. I found happiness, and it's with Lena. You need to respect that. Lena watched the exchange, her heart swelling with admiration for Claus. He was finally standing up for himself, for them. The tension in the air crackled as Marie's expression shifted from amusement to indignation. Fine, she snapped, her voice cold. But don't say I didn't warn you. You'll regret this. With that, she turned on her heel and left, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Claus exhaled slowly, the weight of the confrontation lifting. He turned back to Lena, who was staring at him with wide eyes, a mixture of disbelief and hope flickering across her face. Did you mean what you said? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Every word, he replied, reaching for her hand, finally intertwining his fingers with hers. I want to build a future with you, Lena. I choose you. A smile broke through the clouds of uncertainty that had enveloped her. She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth and sincerity radiating from him. I want that too, but it's going to take time, trust, and a lot of work. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Claus promised, his gaze locked onto hers. Together, we can face anything. As they sat together, hand in hand, a sense of clarity washed over them. The cafe buzzed around them, but in that moment, it was just the two of them, two souls intertwined, ready to embrace whatever the future held. They left the cafe together, stepping out into the vibrant world beyond. Hearts aligned and spirits lifted, prepared to navigate the unknown with courage and love.